The smartest people are disappearing, quietly, without protest. Not just physically either, but mentally, socially, and spiritually. They aren't staging revolutions or writing manifestos, they're pulling back. They're detaching from a world that feels too shallow, too loud, too broken. And most people don't even notice it's happening. But here's the thing, they're not giving up because they're weak. They're giving up because they're exhausted. Because when intelligence collides with systemic dysfunction, when logic runs into apathy and insight is treated like arrogance, something snaps, not violently, but permanently. Friedrich Nietzsche warned about this. He saw it in his own time, in the rise of mediocrity over excellence, in the triumph of comfort over challenge, in what he called the last man, a society where ambition dies and comfort reigns. He wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. And eventually, the ones who can fly stop trying."
We've reached a point where critical thought feels like a liability, where asking real questions about power, purpose, truth gets you labeled as difficult, cynical, or worse, irrelevant. And over time, the people who once lit up classrooms, boardrooms, online forums, they fall silent, not because they're wrong, but because they're tired of shouting into a void. You can trace this pattern across history. The collapse of civilizations isn't always marked by war or famine. Sometimes the collapse is quiet. It happens when the thinkers check out, when the philosophers stop writing, when the artists stop creating, when the people with vision decide it's not worth the fight. It's not that they don't care, it's that they've learned the system doesn't care. They watch ignorance get rewarded, mediocrity get promoted, complexity get flattened into slogans and algorithms. They see how institutions are built to favor obedience, not insight, popularity, not depth. And slowly, they stop investing their energy into a game rigged against them.
Nietzsche saw this decay long before it metastasized into the modern era. He described the herd morality, a culture that punishes deviation, glorifies sameness, and demands that everyone march in lockstep. He argued that the exceptional would either go mad in the process of resisting it, or retreat entirely. Today, we're watching the second option unfold in real time. This isn't just a philosophical idea, it's real. Companies lose their best talent not because they weren't paid enough, but because they couldn't take the bureaucracy anymore. Students drop out of school not because they weren't capable, but because they were too awake to tolerate the drudgery. Relationships fail because one partner dares to think too deeply about things the other refuses to even acknowledge. The quiet withdrawal takes many forms: the gifted employee who stops speaking up in meetings, the curious teenager who zones out in class, the friend who used to challenge ideas but now just nods along. These people don't announce their exit, they just fade. They become what Carl Jung might have called shadow dwellers, people who retreat inward not out of fear, but as a form of self-preservation. This collapse is hard to measure because it doesn't show up in charts or headlines, but its effects are everywhere. We see a rise in depression, burnout, isolation, not just among the overworked, but among the over-aware. People who see too much, feel too much, and have no outlet for it, in a culture that prizes surface-level thinking. Nietzsche predicted that when a society loses its will to question, its will to rise above comfort, it starts to rot from the inside. He believed that without a striving toward higher values, toward truth, strength, and individuality, a culture would breed nihilism. And when the smart stop trying, nihilism wins. And here's the part no one wants to admit. The people withdrawing, they're not being replaced. Not really. You can flood a platform with content, but that doesn't mean it has depth. You can fill a school with students, but that doesn't mean they're learning how to think. You can create 100 apps to boost productivity, but that doesn't mean anyone is actually creating anything of value. This is how collapse works in the modern world, not with an explosion, but with silence, with the slow disappearance of insight, wisdom, and vision, with the erosion of meaning disguised as progress. And the scariest part? Most of society is too distracted to notice. But not everyone retreats.
Some fight the current. They speak out, they create, they build alternatives. The problem is they're outnumbered and often outgunned, because what's rewarded isn't depth, but noise, not originality, but consensus, and that wears people down. Machiavelli once said that in corrupt societies, the virtuous man is seen as dangerous, not because he poses a physical threat, but because he reveals uncomfortable truths. The smart become threats not by force, but by clarity, and in a society that runs on illusions, that clarity is intolerable. That's why so many of them go silent, not because they have nothing left to say, but because they realize no one's listening. The marketplace of ideas has been replaced by an algorithm, one optimized for outrage, distraction, and tribalism. Try discussing nuance and watch it sink. Post something inflammatory and watch it explode. The incentives are backwards, and the intelligent know it. Even worse, many of them turn inward. They detach not just from society, but from themselves. The cost of awareness without expression is a kind of slow psychological suffocation. Carl Jung wrote that repression doesn't just silence the soul, it twists it. When the mind can't find a place to manifest, it begins to rot in isolation. We see this in the rise of escapism, not just through substances or media, but through the retreat into curated bubbles. Intellectuals hiding in niche forums, artists creating only for themselves, thinkers withdrawing into theory with no bridge to the world. It's a kind of soft exile, a quiet refusal to participate in a world that doesn't want to listen. But Nietzsche warned that this refusal has a consequence. When the best minds stop engaging with the world reshapes itself without them. When the few who see clearly abandon the many who don't, chaos rushes in to fill the void. And eventually that chaos turns on everyone, whether they noticed or not. Plato offered a parallel warning in the Republic. He described what happens when societies stop valuing truth, when sophists, those who manipulate with rhetoric, replace philosophers, when democracy, unchecked by wisdom, decays into tyranny. He said that unless those with insight step forward, the ignorant will lead and drag everyone with them. Today, that's more than a theory. We're watching it unfold in our institutions, our media, our politics. The loudest voices win, the simplest slogans spread, and the smartest people? They're watching from the sidelines, slowly realizing that wisdom isn't just ignored, it's punished. That's the tragedy, because the withdrawal of the intelligent isn't just a loss of talent, it's a signal that something deeper is broken. A system that drives away its best is a system on borrowed time. You can suppress thought, you can reward conformity, but you can't build a future on it. When Nietzsche described the coming age of nihilism, he didn't mean chaos in the streets, he meant a void of meaning, a slow collapse of belief in truth, beauty, excellence. And he knew that when meaning collapses, people either turn to distraction or to power. And when that happens, the ones who gave up start to look less like outliers and more like prophets. So where does that leave us? Not with answers, not yet, but with a question. What happens to a society when the smartest people give up, not in rage, but in silence? Maybe we're living that answer now. Maybe the real crisis isn't economic or political or environmental. Maybe it's philosophical. Maybe the real danger is that the people most capable of solving our problems are walking away from them. And if that's true, the next collapse won't look like fire and rubble. It'll look like screens full of noise, institutions run on autopilot, and a culture so hollowed out it doesn't even notice who's missing. Because when intelligence goes quiet, civilization doesn't scream, it sighs, and then it falls.